My daughter's 56-year-old teacher used my credit card to book a motel for them. When I knocked on the door, confronting them, he told me, "She wants me." Yeah, buddy, so does the police. My daughter was every father's dream. Until she was 21, she had no interest in dating. She never had a crush on those boy bands, like Big Time Rush or One Direction. Honestly, most men are so horrible that I would have been more than happy if she had moved in with her best friend and 3 cats. But then came the day every father dreads. She came home, and I noticed she was much more distracted than usual. But it wasn't that typical depressed teenager distraction. Her cheeks were flushed and there was a sparkle in her eyes. My paternal instinct went on alert. I knew it was because of a boy, but I also knew there was more to it. If I mentioned the B word, boyfriend, she would go straight into teenager mode and completely ignore me. So I pretended not to notice. And she fell right into it, because every day she made it more obvious. She spent much more time getting ready, spent more on makeup, smiled at her phone. I know what I said before, but still, I was happy for her. And one day, the dream came true. Well, sort of, because she asked me for advice about boys. It was strange to see my little girl growing up, but I was also happy that she wanted to include me in this new phase. "Dad, how do you know when a boy likes you?" she asked innocently. "Honey, most men are idiots. They are simply incapable of hiding what they feel. If you're not sure, that's already a sign that he doesn't like you." "I am sure. I was just asking." I sighed and remained silent. The standard procedure when my daughter is possessed by the demon, also known as teenage hormones. A few minutes later, she smiled again, and the heavy atmosphere disappeared. The feeling can only be compared to the sunrise on a summer day. Ah, the joys of being a father. In the following days, I noticed that things were progressing between her and this mysterious boy, because she started coming home later, at 6 instead of 4, without any plausible explanation. I was going to wait for her to come to me, but then, one day she arrived with a purple mark on her neck, wearing a skirt that should never have passed the school dress code. She lowered her head, as if she knew what was coming next. "Honey, who's the boy you're dating? I don't want to talk about it." She pouted, but I think she saw the concern on my face because she continued. "Dad, he treats me well. He gives me nice things. He makes me feel special. He's not married, he's not in a relationship, and I think he loves me." I raised an eyebrow. "Married? What?" She turned red and went straight to her room, slamming the door. I rested my chin on my hand. Something was wrong. I know 21-year-old boys. And they're always broke. No money. Besides, my daughter always prided herself on not making mistakes when she speaks. A horrible feeling came over me. I immediately got up and went to the family iPad. Years ago, I realized that its camera roll was synchronized with my daughter's. Obviously, I never told her that. Usually it only showed screenshots from Instagram or Snapchat, silly conversations with friends, or selfies with flower filters. But this time, I saw something much worse. There, in the recent photos, was she with her boyfriend, sitting on his lap. It would be normal if I didn't recognize the face. It was Mr. Dalton, her English teacher. Suddenly, everything made sense. The extra smiles at meetings, the constant compliments in the parents' group. Recently, they were even talking about buying a gift to celebrate his retirement. The bitter taste rose in my throat. I wanted to grab her phone, find his address, and beat the bastard to a pulp on the sidewalk. But I knew the situation was delicate, and I didn't want my daughter to stop trusting me. So I went to her room and knocked on the door. When she said I could come in, I entered calmly and sat on the other side of the bed. I was ready to act. "Honey, I just want you to know that I support you in any situation. I hope you and your boyfriend are happy, and tell him I wish him all the best." Her face lit up, exactly as I expected. "Thanks, Dad. You're the best." She gave me a huge hug and promised she would tell him that. As soon as I left the room and closed the door, I almost collapsed. I was disgusted. Pretending like that was destroying me, but I knew it was necessary. And, like clockwork, the next day Mr. Dalton messaged me. It was very cordial. "Good afternoon, sir. I just wanted to say that Ava has been doing very well in classes this week, and I wanted to congratulate you on how you raised her. We talked for a while, and I invited him to dinner. The scumbag accepted, not knowing it would be his last meal. I chose Morello's, a fancy Italian restaurant downtown. But before Friday, I realized I needed help. I couldn't handle this alone, not if I wanted to truly protect Ava. My initial plan to confront him was too risky. What if I lost control? If I got arrested, Ava would be vulnerable. The school counselor, Melissa Winters, always seemed competent, direct, and protective. I went to her office, far from the English department, 15 minutes before the scheduled time. I mentally reviewed what I was going to say while students left the school. When the hallway emptied, I entered. The office was smaller than I expected, with diplomas on the wall and posters about mental health. "Mark, come in," said Melissa, closing the door. The space was cozy, full of plants and motivational posters. "What's going on?" Her voice was calm, direct, her eyes attentive behind her glasses. I took a deep breath, the weight of what I discovered making it difficult even to speak. "This has to stay between us for now." My voice sounded strange. She nodded, serious. "Of course." I placed my phone on the table. "I need you to listen to something. Everything." I played the recording of the conversation with Ava, then the messages with Dalton. I spent the previous night organizing everything. For 45 minutes, Melissa listened motionless, growing increasingly pale. When it ended, she looked at me with horror. "How long has this been going on?" "A few months, I think, maybe more. I can't go straight to the police. Ava would never forgive me. And Dalton is smart. He would turn everything against me." She nodded. "You're right to be cautious. Men like him are manipulators. They plan escape routes. We need to build a case carefully. Above all, protect Ava. What do we do? First, document everything. Dates, times, messages." She leaned in. "Mark, this has to be handled very delicately. If Dalton suspects anything, he might delete evidence. Or worse, convince Ava to run away with him." The idea chilled me inside. I imagined Ava disappearing, leaving only a note. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll do some discreet investigations." She scribbled something. "There might be other students." That never crossed my mind. Knowing that Ava might not be the only one left me between relief and horror. "You think there are others?" "Predators rarely stop at just one." She took notes. "Give me a week. Don't confront him. Act normally. Go to dinner. But record everything." She handed me a sheet with a list of apps for discreet recordings. Acting normally was almost impossible. Ava laughed on her phone. Any noise made me jump. 3 days later, she started acting more reserved. Locked her bedroom door. Took her phone even to the bathroom, which she never did before. That night, I looked at the synchronized photos again. My heart stopped. New images. Ava in a hotel room, sitting on the bed. They weren't explicit, but it was clear. It wasn't a classroom. Generic decor. Standard lamp. A hotel. She smiled at the camera, wearing a dress I had never seen. Very adult, very expensive. I downloaded everything, included it in the file. The images burned in my mind, keeping me awake. The next morning, a message from Melissa. "We need to talk. I found something." I spilled coffee on the counter. We arranged to meet at a cafe. She was already there, a folder on the table. I reviewed the attendance records. She slid the papers over. Several absences in the last classes on Fridays. "Dalton's planning time," I muttered. Everything fit. And there's more. 3 years ago, another student. Nothing was proven. She changed schools. She showed emails between principals discussing the case. Why wasn't he fired? The family moved. No formal complaint, but I found the girl's best friend. She remembers things. Will she talk? Not yet, she's afraid, but Mark, we need more, something concrete. That night, I put a recorder in the pocket of Ava's backpack while she was showering. The guilt was crushing, but I thought about the photos. On Friday, Ava arrived at 6:30 p.m. "Dad, I thought you had dinner tonight." "Cancelled. Wasn't feeling well." I pretended to cough. She seemed relieved. "I'm going to take a shower and then study." I grabbed the recorder and went to the office. Trembling, I connected it to the computer. The first audio files were normal, but then I heard Dalton's voice. "You know I would never hurt you, right? People wouldn't understand what we have. They would try to separate us." My stomach turned. My dad likes you, said Ava dreamily. A laugh. Your dad sees what I want him to see. Men like us understand each other. What do you mean by that? Nothing, darling. Just that your dad and I are men of the world now. Later. Did you finish that college essay? Berkeley would be perfect. Close enough for us to see each other always. At the end, I have a present. Paper being torn. It's beautiful, but it seems expensive. Nothing is too expensive for you. Just don't wear it near your dad yet, our little secret. I stopped the recording. I felt sick. He was buying jewelry for her, marking his territory. I copied the files, messaged Melissa. I have the audio, clear proof of grooming. I canceled the dinner with Dalton. I didn't trust myself to see him. Over the weekend, Ava became more withdrawn. Sunday night, I heard her crying. On Monday, a new message from Melissa. Principal's office, 4 p.m., bring everything. I prepared everything. Recordings, photos, records, timeline. At 3:30 p.m., I went to the school, parking lot almost empty. And there was Ava, at the entrance, arguing with a girl I recognized, Skylar Williams, her lab partner. You don't know what you're talking about, Ava whispered, her face red with anger, her voice trembling with that kind of blind fury that only love-struck teenagers can distill. Skylar, on the other hand, was firm, arms crossed, eyes shining with something between anger and fear. I leaned behind a pillar and stayed there for a second longer than I should have, listening. He's lying to you, Ava. He lied to me too. Skylar almost shouted but controlled herself. You're just another one. He does this with everyone. You think you're special? He told me I was special too. The air left my lungs. Ava took a step back as if she had been physically pushed. You're jealous, that's it. You've always been jealous of me. Just because he chose me. Skylar snorted, also stepping back, her eyes now welling up. Good luck, Ava. Really. Because when everything falls apart, and it will fall apart, I hope there's still someone around to help you. She walked away with hard, quick steps, and I quickly moved away from the entrance, circling the building as if I had come from the parking lot. My face was hot, my vision slightly blurred, as if my body had activated all emergency signals at once. Ava saw me when I entered and wiped her eyes too quickly. What are you doing here so early? She asked, trying to sound casual. I have a meeting with the board. School matters. She nodded slowly. Her eyes were red. I didn't ask anything. It wouldn't help. All of that was still bubbling inside her, fermenting in Dalton's lies, fermenting in that sweet poison he poured into my daughter's ears as if it were love. When the meeting began, I sat with Melissa and the principal, a woman named Joanna Lopes, who looked like someone who had seen a lot and tolerated very little. There was another man in the room, in a gray suit with dark glasses hanging from his shirt collar, someone from the legal department, the type who starts calm and ends with a warrant in hand. The folder I brought was heavy, metaphorically and literally. I pressed my hand on it a moment before opening. Melissa took the lead. Her tone was cold, surgical, no flourishes. She explained the evidence, attendance records, messages. Then it was my turn. I spoke calmly. I forced myself to speak calmly. Each slide I showed, each audio I played, including the part where Dalton said men like us understand each other, was one more nail in his coffin. The legal man began taking notes as if he were documenting a war crime. The principal remained silent. No interruptions, just her eyes widening with each new revelation. This is more than enough to notify the school board and involve the police, she finally said. With the recording, with the messages, there's no way to protect this man anymore. He can't know we're coming, Melissa reinforced. If he realizes, he'll delete everything, disappear, and Ava might go with him. The principal nodded. We'll remove him from the school discreetly, today. But I knew, deep down I knew, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to simply remove him from the school, make a report, issue a public note of repudiation. Not when that worm was poisoning my daughter from the inside out. Not when he continued to be the sun around which her world revolved. He needed to be exposed, destroyed. On the way back home, I drove in silence, my head hammered out of sync. Every word spoken by Ava, Every enchanted sigh about that monster came back like a slap. Upon arriving, she was on the couch, wearing headphones, laughing alone, probably talking to him. I took a deep breath, sat in the armchair beside her. "We need to talk," I said firmly. She took off her headphones, looking sideways. "About what?" "About Mr. Dalton." Immediately she tensed up. "Dad, listen." My voice came out harsher than I intended. "You're not in trouble, but you need to hear me. Because he is. And he's going to fall. And I don't want you to be clinging to his neck when that happens." Ava stood up, her eyes filling with tears. "You don't understand. He loves me. He said he would never do anything to hurt me." "That's right," I said quietly. "And that's exactly what he said to Skylar, too." She froze. "She tried to warn you, I heard. Today, at school, he did the same thing to her. Promised everything. Love, a future, secrets, gifts. It's not true." Her voice was low but trembling. "He took you to a motel with my credit card, Ava. Want me to show you the bill?" Silence. Just the sound of the living room fan. He said I understood him, that men like us understand each other. I spat the words like poison. "Does that really sound like love to you?" She finally broke down. The tears came all at once, uncontrollably. She tried to move away, but I held her. She cried as if she were drowning, as if everything had collapsed, and indeed it had. The house of cards he had built around her had fallen, and the pieces were everywhere. I just held her. For long minutes, I just held my daughter. Because that's all she was. A daughter. A girl. Who fell into the clutches of a manipulative, disgusting adult. That night she slept in my lap, as she did when she was little. I covered her with the sofa blanket and went to my office. And it was then that I made the decision. Dalton wasn't just going to be arrested. He was going to be annihilated. I went into the parent groups, the community groups. I used the audios. I used the evidence, carefully, strategically. I sent everything anonymously to the local press, to a journalist who had previously exposed school scandals. I included the messages, the lighter excerpts from the audios, but enough to expose the truth. In less than 24 hours, Dalton became a headline. Veteran teacher accused of emotional abuse and inappropriate conduct with female students even as adults. He was removed, with no right to say goodbye. His house was surrounded by cameras. Neighbors spat on his gate. Parents threatened justice with their own hands. The following Monday, he didn't show up at school, and he never would again, but Ava didn't get out of bed, and I knew. That was still just the beginning. She would have to rebuild everything, and so would I. But now, the worm was on the ground, and I wasn't finished with him yet. Seeing him fall wasn't enough. Seeing his name in the newspapers, his house surrounded by news vans, his social media being invaded by a wave of furious parents, was just the beginning. I wanted more, needed more. Not only because he destroyed something in Ava that I might never be able to fix, but because the more I dug, the more bodies I found under Mr. Dalton's well-manicured garden. The first to approach me was Skylar. She appeared at the gate 2 days after the news leaked, with a backpack on her shoulders and a hard, exhausted expression. Her eyes were red, not just from crying, but from accumulated anger. From that ancient anger that grows silently for years until it becomes a monstrous thing inside us. "Can I talk to you?" she said. I didn't hesitate. I made coffee and took her to the kitchen. Ava was still locked in her room, barely eating. Skylar spoke for 2 hours. She described with surgical precision how Dalton approached her 3 years earlier, when she was in her first year of high school. The method was the same. It started with exaggerated compliments, then came the private lessons, the gifts, the ambiguous comments about maturity, destiny, soul affinity. She told how he made her feel as if she had been chosen, how he suggested that they were different from the world, superior, how when she tried to distance herself, he threatened to expose conversations, to make up stories about her. He said that if I told anyone, no one would believe me, that I would be the crazy girl who tried to seduce the teacher. She was shaking. I had to hold myself with both hands on the table to keep from punching something. "The worst part," she finally said, is that he convinced me that it was love. And for a while, I believed it. I nodded slowly. Do you want to officially report him? She hesitated. I do, but not alone. You are not alone. The next day, Melissa called me. She had tracked down 3 former students who had changed schools during high school, all during the time Dalton was active. One of them, now 20 years old, sent a 6-page email telling everything. It was almost a copy of Skylar's story. Different words, same script. The pattern was clear. Dalton was a serial predator, methodical, calculated, patient. The school knew. Someone knew. The omission wasn't ignorance, it was complicity. That's when my anger found a new target. The institution. I went to the school, not to talk, to demand. The principal received me, more haggard than before. Deep, dark circles, the look of someone who had been called an accomplice more times than she could count in recent days. You knew. Maybe not everything, but you knew. She took a deep breath. There were rumors. Parents were suspicious. There was an anonymous complaint in 2019, but we couldn't prove anything. And the girl who disappeared, the one who suddenly changed schools. Her parents withdrew the complaint before making it official. There was no evidence. It was archived. Because you wanted it archived. She didn't respond. Dalton was at this school for over 20 years. Do you really think Ava was the first? That Skylar was the exception? You chose to look the other way. Her gaze hardened. We had nothing concrete, now we do. And the board has already been notified. He will be discredited. I don't just want him discredited, I want him in prison, convicted. And I want the name of this school in every damn article that comes out about him. That doesn't depend on me. But it depends on me. And at that moment I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to stop at Dalton. I contacted a criminal lawyer. A guy named Halio, specialized in cases of sexual violence and institutional negligence. Halio wasn't a lawyer who looked for settlements. He was a legal butcher. And he found my case fascinating. You have everything. Evidence of grooming. Emotional coercion. With the accounts of the other victims, we have a pattern history. With the school silent and records erased, we have a case of intentional negligence. That means jail time. For him, and if we push right, for the directors too. He smiled with his eyes. But it's going to hurt. Good, I said. I want it to hurt. We spent the following days putting together the dossier. I had become an expert in child and adolescent protection protocols, in jurisprudence on abuse of teaching authority, in how to leak information ethically and destructively. With Melissa's support, we got the records the school didn't want to release. Altered grade spreadsheets, ignored conduct reports, a letter written by the pedagogical coordinator in 2021 recommending that Dalton be removed for ethical reasons. Ignored. And Ava? She was changing. With time, and with a lot of patience, she began to emerge again. The questions started to appear. Will he go to prison? Will he hate me? Will people think it was my fault? And one by one I answered, calmly, with truth, with pain. It wasn't your fault. He deceived you, as he deceived others. He'll pay for it, and if anyone dares to blame you, they'll have to go through me first. Sometimes she just listened. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she screamed. And one night, out of nowhere, she said, I want to tell my story too. My heart broke and stitched itself back together in the same second. And that's how the official complaint was registered. With a name, with a voice, with a face. 12 days later, Dalton was arrested, in front of his house, handcuffed with a wrinkled shirt and an expression that the newspapers described as surprise, but that I recognized as panic. For the first time, he was out of control. But for me, it still wasn't enough, because I still hadn't seen him apologize, still hadn't seen him look Ava in the eyes, still hadn't heard him admit it, still hadn't seen a damn second of remorse, and I was willing to go all the way for that. Dalton might have been exposed, handcuffed, removed from the school through the back door with a hood trying to hide the face of someone who knew exactly what he had done. But none of that seemed like justice to me. It was reaction. It was consequence. It was the ground beginning to shake beneath him, but not the collapse he deserved. The feeling of incompleteness gnawed at my insides. like a sentence interrupted before the period. So I started digging. I went after more evidence, more victims, more broken silences. And I discovered that there were many more ruins beneath the name Professor Dalton. The first call I received came from a mother, Renata. Her daughter studied with Ava, 1 year above. Said the girl left school suddenly, claiming anxiety, panic, identity crisis. No one talked about it anymore. Now, after the scandal, everything started to make sense. The girl didn't want to talk to me, not yet, but Renata thanked me and cried. Not out of relief, out of shame for not having seen it before. Then came others, more discreet, more hesitant. Young women, some with children, others still trying to piece together an adolescence that was never properly lived. Dalton had passed through them like a cold shadow. He did the same thing to all of them, made it seem like he was the only safe place in the world. And when they finally understood what had happened, it was too late. They had lost pieces of themselves. Each story that came made me sicker, more determined, And Ava? Ava began to change. Slowly. The first days after the arrest were silent. A kind of tense peace hung over the house. She locked herself in her room, read, slept, sometimes just stared at the ceiling. Adolescence pulsed around her like a city in ruins. Everything had been interrupted, even time. But she was an intelligent girl, strong. And even at the bottom of the well I saw the silent struggle. She wanted to understand, wanted to recover herself. One early morning I woke up to the sound of crying. It wasn't the muffled crying of someone who wants to hide. It was the crying of someone who can't hold it in anymore. I went to her room. The light was off. I opened the door carefully. She didn't say anything, just curled up when I approached. I sat on the edge of the bed. We remained in silence for long minutes, until she murmured, "Dad, why did he do this to me?" I swallowed hard. To answer would be to lie. To say too much would be to hurt her once more. "Because he's sick, honey. But also because he's a coward. He knew you were better than him, that you were light. And he wanted to extinguish you so he wouldn't feel so miserable." She let out a stronger sob, and I hugged her. She was trembling as if she had a fever. "I feel dirty, Dad." "You're not dirty. Not at all. You were deceived. But that doesn't define you. You know why?" She shook her head. "Because you're here. You're feeling. You're crying. And that means he didn't manage to kill what's most beautiful about you." Ava hugged me back and cried until she fell asleep, and I stayed there all night, with my head against the headboard of her bed, thinking about everything the world lets happen to good girls while we look away, pretending it's normal. 2 days later, she asked to speak with Melissa. Voluntarily. That was the trigger. Ava gave a complete testimony. Detailed, cold, brave. Each of her words was a knife cutting through the disgusting narrative that Dalton and his defenders were trying to sew together. And then came the bombshell. Justice decided to release him on bail. The excuse? Good behavior. No criminal record. Lack of physical evidence. I stared at the phone screen with the news and for a second thought I was going to vomit. I called Melissa. She was beside herself too. But with her, anger turned into strategy. "He won't escape," she said. "We just need to make more noise now." That's when Ava said, "I want to appear. I want to tell everything. I want people to see my face." I froze. Not because I doubted her strength, but because I knew how the world treats girls who have the courage to speak up, how social media are blood courts, how sexism crawls into every corner. But at the same time, I saw in her eyes that this wasn't impulse. It was necessity. So we recorded. A neutral room, just the camera, Ava sitting. Ava, black t-shirt, hair loose, clean face and firm voice. "I am Ava, I am 21 years old, and I was a victim of emotional abuse, manipulation, and grooming by my English teacher, who was 56 years old. I thought I was living a fairy tale. Today I understand it was a trap. The video was published, it went viral in less than 10 hours. And it brought an avalanche. Press, lawyers, protests in front of Dalton's house. A petition with 40,000 signatures demanding his preventive detention. The following week, justice reversed its decision. The judge who had granted bail was replaced. Dalton was taken back to prison. The new judge was clear. There is sufficient evidence of manipulation of women in series, with concealment of evidence and potential intimidation of victims. The defendant's freedom represents a direct risk to the investigation and to the integrity of the victims. At the preliminary hearing, Dalton was brought in handcuffed. Thin, without a haircut, without glasses, but with the same arrogant expression as always. He saw me. I saw him. Our eyes met. And at that moment, for the first time, he lowered his eyes before I did. It wasn't a victory cry. It was just an internal silence that told me, he knows. The trial took place 2 months later. Long, exhausting, intense. Each victim testified, including Skylar, including Ava, and each one added a new nail to the legal coffin of the man who for years had hidden behind boards, grades, and cheap poetry. The prosecutor dismantled every attempt by the defense to paint Ava as a seductive teenager. The recordings spoke for themselves. The manipulation was obvious. The repetitions, the pattern, the gifts, the isolation, everything, absolutely everything, was straight out of a predator's manual. The sentence came in absolute silence. 22 years. No right to parole before 12. Permanent prohibition from exercising any educational activity. Dalton didn't cry, didn't apologize, didn't look at anyone. But to me, it didn't matter because I saw Ava standing, head held high, with the same girl inside her, the one who at 7 told me she wanted to be an astronaut, the one who at 9 wrote a poem about ants, the one who at 13 made me promise that I would never let anyone hurt her. She survived and flourished. Today she speaks to other girls, writes articles, wants to study psychology, says that trauma won't be what defines her. It will be what shapes her fight. Sometimes I still catch her crying in the middle of the night. Sometimes it's still me who cries, but between one tear and another, there is now something new, resistance. And when I look at her, I know Dalton didn't win. He tried to kill the brightness of a star and only managed to light a fire. She burns now with her own light. And me? I never let go of her hand. Not for a second.